Welcome to Fun Palais Podcast, where we are unpacking opinions and changing destinations. I am your host, Shirley Altador, where each week we will chat about how to rise strong out of all types of obstacles that come with relationships. Through personal life experiences and discussions ranging from infidelity, trust, forgiveness, sex, heartbreak, self-love, and so much more. I am passionate and obsessed to provide guidance to every woman to create a better life. Let's dive in, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. With me, your virtual girlfriend. Welcome back to another episode of Storytime. Today we have a special guest with us. We have Trish, who is the Feel Good Gut Coach, a certified health and nutrition coach with a background in psychology and public health. After waking up to too many times in her early 20s, feeling like she got hit by a bus, Trish said enough was enough. She learned to fuel her gut instead of her emotions and mended her relationship with food. Now she helps busy professionals manage their stress, emotional eating, and food sensitivities by simplifying nutrition and lifestyle habits so they can truly feel good in their gut. Trish, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Shirley.
No problem. Thank you for being a guest. I tell my guests you don't realize how important you are for the show because you allow others to be like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
look at all the people she had on. So I thank you for being a guest on the show. I appreciate you
Oh,
coming on.
that was wonderful to hear. Thanks.
Thank you. So now I'm going to pass you the mic. You can add on to what I said, you know, say a little bit about yourself before you go
Sure.
into your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm someone who kind of had an interest in health, wellness, personal development in my early teens and even early 20s in college. But it wasn't until I had my own personal struggles. Like I mentioned, I was really quite young, but just waking up so low energy, like digestive concerns, foods that had never affected my body. I was kind of someone who could, ignorantly eat whatever I wanted without much effect was really starting to take a toll on my health physically, but mentally as well. And it was during this time that I started to say, okay, what's up? I need to start researching what's going on for me. I started to go to doctors and see
Hmm.
specialists, and I wasn't getting a ton of answers. I kind of had got that label diagnosis of IBS without any real guidance on how to take care of myself. It was like I actually, one of my doctors had said something along the lines of most young women just have IBS. Like,
Ah.
just something you have to deal with. And one, I didn't think that was true. And two, I didn't really want to accept that. I really
Hmm.
wanted to have a healthier life. One of my biggest values is feeling good and being able to show up as my authentic self. And I
Hmm.
really wasn't during this time because I was so drained and my health was really poor. So I actually signed up for my first certification program to help myself. I kind of had an
Oh.
inkling, like maybe I'll use this in the future to help other people. But really, I was like, I was going through it as a client myself. I'm like, I think this is what I need, this comprehensive, holistic way of looking at healing. And it was a wonderful experience. And then as I healed and the things that I learned, my passion grew. And then I kind of sprouted from there and eventually ended up starting my own business to help other people like me.
Wonderful to hear. And I've heard of IBS before. I know a little bit about it because it's
Okay.
irritable bowel syndrome, correct?
Correct.
But I
Yep.
am not educated in any way, shape, or form to enlighten anyone about it. You just hear about it through the grapevine, but I never really
Yeah.
did any research on it. And I had a family member that had the same diagnosis that was given to them, but it wasn't a confident diagnosis. It was more like you could have this, but then it could be this as well. So that's how I've
Yep.
heard about it. The first time I actually heard about it.
So
So,
what's really interesting about that is that like not so confident diagnosis that your family member got is the norm. It's normal to be like, as a syndrome diagnosis, it's kind of like
Hmm.
we don't think it's other things. It maybe could be. Right now, it
Hmm.
doesn't look like any other huge diseases, so we're just going to call it this kind of syndrome. And so what I use that term IBS, but sometimes I say like general gut issues or general digestive
Oh,
issues, and then
okay.
kind of go from there with talking about how the gut impacts the rest of our health. So you're certainly not alone in that. Like, I hear it through the grapevine, not really sure what it means. And even in the health world, it's kind of one of those syndromes, kind of just a label at this point.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So now, how far back? How old are you now?
I'm 26.
You're 26. Oh my God, you make me sound like an old lady. I'm like 12 years older than you. Jesus. I'm not an old lady in my mind. I'm still young. My
You are
kids think
not.
I'm like 68 instead of 38.
You look absolutely wonderful, and
Thank you.
I'm kind of a baby. That's what I tell people. I'm like, I'm really a baby. I'm
Ah.
kind of someone who's like things have happened to me at a young age. So this was probably around 1920 when I was
Hmm.
first experiencing these issues, and then like really struggling into my early 20s. And then the last few years or so, I would say like 3 to 5 years is when I started to gain clarity.
Gotcha. So now we're going to take you back. We're going to go flashbacking a little bit. So before, how was your childhood life like? Good, bad, relationship? How was all that
Yeah.
before we get into the gut discussion? Because you said that started at about 19, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I think it's so interesting to think about my childhood and my early life. It was really wonderful. I have wonderful, wonderful parents who
Hmm.
are so proud of me and so supportive. Kind of grew up lower middle class, but so there were certainly friends and people around me within my community that I saw greater privilege, but I'm
Hmm.
aware of the many privileges that I had
Hmm.
as a lower middle class white family. And it's interesting to think about traumas or things that I've experienced because it's not something that I've pinpointed yet. And the reason I say that is because, like, we're going to preface into the gut health stuff. And
Hmm.
I'm a firm believer that gut health issues really stem from stress, that stress is the number one
Gotcha.
cause.
Is that
Um,
very similar to what people say when they what's the other one? Now brain fart. Ulcer.
Yeah, yep, like a peptic ulcer. Yep,
Hmm.
yep. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I think stress is one of the major causes of disease, and I can speak to it later. Our mind gut connection, our gut brain axis, is this
Hmm.
really powerful connection between our gut and brain. And I think it's so influential and powerful and important to note. And the reason I bring that up is because I was like such an anxious child, and I'm not sure why. Like I was just one of those like kids that was kind of shy when I was younger, and then anxious and stressed out as a teen when I probably didn't have to be. It's like in retrospect, I look back and it's like I think there was this more free spirited person there all along. But it's interesting that I kind of had that personality, and I would say that that's just one of the things that is most prevalent when I think about my childhood. Like, man, I experienced a lot of stress and anxiety, and most of it was very internal.
From what though? What was the stress and anxiety from? Like from school, from home, or just, or were you
Yeah.
anxious about your grades? Were you one of those kids where A was so important? So if you got a B, you felt like a failure. What was the stress and anxiety from?
It was exactly what you just said. I was my biggest stress and anxiety was around like my own personal achievements. And it's interesting because I too again feel like I had family who showed me love and support and like
Hmm.
were proud of me no matter what. And I try and think back, like was it friendships that I had or other family members? Like I had one sibling, one brother who never felt much competition, but maybe it was friends or cousins where I felt like a lot of my worth was related to how well I did in school or
Hmm.
in any activity that I was a part of. And
Hmm.
I do think that maybe my parents maybe like inflated that a little bit for me. Like they were so proud of me. So I took that reward as like, okay, this is maybe what it means to be like a straight A student. That's me. Like I created that identity, a bit of a perfectionist, mentality at such a young age.
Now your parents are young because if you're 26, I'm 12 years older than you. Your parents got to be in their late 40s or early 50s.
No, that's the thing. My parents are older. So my parents, my
60,
mother,
70.
yeah, they're in their 60s. They're in their 60s. They're
Okay.
gonna be like, whoa, whoa, early to mid 60s now. They had me later because my mom had trouble getting pregnant.
I
Um,
see.
but
And how
just
far are you from your brother? What's the
so
distance in
just
age?
2 years. So I
Oh,
always like to say my mom was 35, mid 30s, which isn't so late nowadays. However, back in the day, that was like a geriatric pregnancy to have wait till their 30s, right? Mid
yeah.
30s.
That is a geriatric pregnancy back.
Yeah.
What, you were born in the 80s, right? Were you born in?
I was born 95.
Shit.
I know. I know. That's why I say I'm
Gosh,
a
I
baby. I
graduated
know.
eighth grade in 97.
Did you really?
Yeah. Oh, shit.
So you're true
So,
90s kids. I say I'm a 90s kid, but really that was my
no, you're like a
childhood.
2000 kid.
I kind of am. But you know what? Most of the generations say I'm still a millennial, and I'll say that. I'm like, I'm not a Gen
But
Z
you know,
yet. Okay.
I'm a millennial. I'm at the top of the millennial because I
The
think I
top.
was born in 83. I think millennial starts either 82 or 83. Don't quote me. So I'm at the
Okay.
tippy top.
Yes. And then I'm at the very, very bottom of that. When I look it up, it's usually like up to like 96, 97, they say millennials.
Oh,
So I'm
that's
at the
when it
very tail
stops.
end. But the Gen Z are more the ones that were like closer to 2000. So I do like to make that differentiation that I think
I'm a
I'm still a
millennial.
millennial.
I'm a millennial. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then with the your background, when you were talking about your
Oh, yeah.
parents and how loving and they were just so encouraging, I thought like hippies.
Oh,
Isn't
they're
that
like
awful?
70s flower children. They totally
Are
are.
they
They're like
really? Okay.
70s rock
So it all
music.
makes sense.
It all makes
Gotcha.
sense, right? And they were so excited to have children. I like to say that I'm like a double miracle because my mom had
Oh.
my brother and she wasn't
And
supposed
then
to have
she gets pregnant
kids.
after
And then
you.
she gets pregnant. They were like, this is your one child. Hooray. And then it's like,
Oh,
and then I was another one. And we both were very healthy children. We really didn't have
good.
any like complications like in our early years. So yeah, it is really interesting.
Okay, so I understand what you mean by when you say stress, and I totally agree with you. Stress will literally break your body down. When I go through an extreme amount of turmoil in my life, you know how some people eat? My metabolism just shuts down. When I'm
Ah,
really
yep,
stressing really, really bad, that's how you know something's going on in my life because I didn't eat. I couldn't eat. I had
yeah.
to literally force myself to eat. Like, you have to eat something. You need nourishment. So I totally understand. Stress will affect you in ways you don't even realize. You could either
Yeah.
gain weight, you could lose weight, or certain things, your stomach might start hurting, or just
Yeah.
all types of stuff. So you and I are opposite because I was one of those kids like, if I get a C, you better be happy. I was not achieving. If I got an A, this is exceptional. And I only got an A on a subject that I really cared about. If I
Yeah.
didn't really care about the subject, I was giving you a B. And if I really didn't care about the subject, I was a
It's
C. So
USC.
I was more like your B child.
Sure.
I wasn't really truly an A child where you're like, oh my God, if I don't get an A, my world is ending. And I was like, girl, I would have been your friend like, Trish,
I
get
know.
it together. I can't do this again.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And it's so like when I look back, like I love people like that. I'm so attracted to that mentality and I like to think I've shifted and changed, but absolutely that was like my tendency as a kid. Yeah,
So
it's funny.
now, as you're going through school, you're passing, you're in high school because you said this started at 19. What was it doing to your life and how was it debilitating you? Was your stomach hurting all the time? What was the issue that you were having?
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. It's so fun to reflect because um
And I want to say I can only imagine if your childhood life was rocky, what would this have done to you?
right.
Because
Right.
you were bringing the stress on to yourself with your anxiety.
Yeah.
But if your childhood life was not as good as it was, what would this have done to you too? Which we won't know, but it was just something I was
Sure.
thinking of. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm glad you said that because I will bring up similar points to clients as we kind of explore how their gut
Mm-hmm.
issues surface that it's like not to play the blame game, but kind of to say like it's no wonder. what we know now about how your nervous system affects your gut, like it's no wonder that the things that you've endured would
Mm-hmm.
result like or would manifest in some way physically. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's not your fault that you have these gut issues. It kind of makes sense. Of course, we want to go like forward thinking path to healing that can't be changed right now, but recognizing that, like, okay, you've gone through traumas or whatever it is, or just recognizing these tendencies. And what happened around the time as you were asking, around 19 for me, I was in college, and I think I had that high achieving mentality. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized that a lot of my habits, my eating habits, my sleeping habits, all those things were kind of conflated. I was pushing. I was getting really into exercise. And as
Mm-hmm.
someone who was like, had this like nickname string bean as a kid, I was like, let me just exercise a bunch and like get on the muscle. And like, and that goes along with my personality of just want to go, go, go with school. But I started to feel really depleted. So, of course, it was energy. For me, digestively, it was just like weird bowel movements. Like I would eat
Mm-hmm.
and get sick, and I'd be like, that never used to happen. Everything used to
Mm-hmm.
flow smoothly in the bathroom. um, and then there were other things like, I call them the secondary symptoms of gut issues. Like these rashes that were appearing on my skin, they weren't red, but they were
Oh.
itchy and they were scaly. And I'd go to the doctor and they're like, that's kind of some unexplained dermatitis. But
So, did you have any type of special meal? Like, were you a vegan? Were you a vegetarian,
no,
pescatarian? Nothing. You
nope.
ate
I
everything, all
I ate
meats.
everything. I ate
Okay.
everything. And then my next step was starting to look, and we can definitely like go many different directions with this, but I'll say my
Mm-hmm.
next step in healing was just seeing like, does food affect me? So I
Mm-hmm.
started to then do some restriction, and I got rid of some of the bigger indicators that research shows could affect gut health and digestion, like dairy and gluten. And it was during this time that before I even started to feel better and my bowel movements regulated, my skin rashes cleared up after about 2 weeks of no dairy and gluten. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh shit, that must be something.
So
So
no
as
dairy and no gluten. That's
yeah,
no gluten. That's a lot, girl.
it is a lot. It is a lot. And
No dairy, no milk,
yeah.
no
So
ice
this
cream.
was no ice cream at this time. So I was kind of this short period of restriction, but as my story continues, it's really one of honoring your body, honoring your cravings, really an intuitive eating approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like to like make that known. I'm glad you said that. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are foods that can affect our body, and we want to care about our nutrition, and nutrition does impact how we feel. However, if we set these rules around food, that can certainly impact our health mentally and physically down the line. So that was kind of my next step, was making sure I still had a healthy relationship with food and I wasn't like having these yes rules or no rules. But the other thing that happened at this time is I dropped 2 pant sizes. But as I've mentioned, my journey has never been one of weight loss. It was all in bloat. I realized that I could have a flat stomach. I just thought that my stomach kind of always had that pregnancy belly. I just kind of figured that's what it was. But during
You're
this time, I'm like,
Trish,
that
you're
was
petite
bloat.
now.
Yes, right,
So
right.
you were smaller than I'm visually seeing now.
Yeah, I was. I was a little. I was. Yep.
You dropped two pant sizes. So you went from like 4 to 2.
I think I was like a 5 at the time, and I went to like a 3, like it
Oh
was, or a
my.
5 to, yeah. I can't exactly remember, but I was um really like my gut was healing, and I
Mm-hmm.
realized that that chronic like feeling in my stomach was this bloat, was something going on internally. And then when I
Mm-hmm.
started to reintroduce some foods, I kind of tried to go back to my other way of living. I
Mm-hmm.
swelled up like a balloon. I remember my
Oh.
boyfriend and I went to the Cheesecake Factory. We had gluten and dairy for the first time. And I immediately, within minutes, started to like heel over. I had that toy belly, and I was like,
Oh.
oh no, this is what happens. And that was really one of the indicators for me to say, okay, I need to come up with some sort of system so I don't feel restricted, but I do need to heal. Clearly, I need to
Exactly.
heal, because if I just feed myself things that don't mesh with my stomach right now, this is going to be what happens every time I eat. That's not cool.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of a gist of my initial healing journey and my initial recognition of my gut
So how
issues.
did that affect your relationship? Because you said your boyfriend at the time, I'm assuming like you guys just stepped out to go eat.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine, like, you think you're going to have a great time, and now you're not having a great time because you're encountering this situation. And when you talk about anxiety, did it affect your relationship? You dropped two pant sizes. Did it affect your romantic relationship when your
Right.
significant other's like, girl, you need to eat? That's the other question. Did you ever suffer from anorexia or bulimia?
No, I never did. I was gonna say when you said that your stress response is to not eat, mine is the
Uh-huh.
opposite. Mine is like I turn to food and I eat a lot. And one of the things that I realized, no eating disorders whatsoever, especially not on the restriction side. But as I studied health coaching, I realized that I definitely was an emotional eater. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like a diagnosable psychological disorder, but it was like, oh, I'm someone who turns to food to handle my emotions. And there are
Gotcha.
times when what I'm doing would be considered a binge, and there was no restriction. But one of the things for me, like you had mentioned, stress can impact your weight. Our
Mm-hmm.
gut health can impact our weight too. And for some people, it has us storing weight and having excess weight. For other people, it's the opposite. I was eating
Okay.
a lot of calories, but I wasn't
Gotcha.
gaining weight. And if I lessened my caloric intake, I was losing weight. It was the opposite.
Got it.
And it
Got it.
was as I healed internally, my gut, then my weight was able to like stabilize and neutralize. And um, of course, then how I was treating my body with food was different as well. I was learning to kind of nourish myself and not always turn to food when I was emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because overeating is an issue with digestion, not just weight gain. You can overeat and not gain weight, but it's still a lot of food for your body to process. So that was something huge for me.
When you use
Um,
the term overeat, right?
mhm.
Just in my mind, and also, are you talking about having like four cheeseburgers? Are you talking what is the definition of overeat to you? Like eating
Yeah.
a whole bag of chips?
Yeah, I think that's a good point because I think my definition is different than like the DSM psychological like
Oh, there's
definition of like
many
binge eating.
different. Oh,
Yeah,
really? Okay.
right. What I'm thinking is like I would, yeah, like the whole bag of chips, like just or always feeling like I always needed a dessert or I always needed certain comfort foods to deal with emotions.
Mm-hmm.
My portions wouldn't be so huge. They were kind of normal portions, but I was just realizing like how many times do I really need to snack throughout the day? I probably don't need this much food for energy. I'm probably turning to this because I have my mid-morning stressor from work and then the mid-afternoon stressor, and then I get home and gosh, it might, that sounds really good, and it was consistently kind of in smaller snippets turning to
Mm-hmm.
food. So that's kind of what I consider my relationship with overeating. It
Gotcha.
wasn't necessarily like I can't stop eating in a sitting. It was more like, oh, food is my thing that I'm constantly turning to, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's celebration, it's happiness, it's sadness, it's anger. It was kind of just that thing that I would always be kind of dipping into.
Because you're the emotional eater, and where I'm the
Yes,
opposite, where I'm stressing out, I'm not
you're the
eating.
you're the emotional non-eater.
Yeah.
That's what we kind of say, like that.
Emotional non-eater.
I'm
Okay.
emotional, I'm stressed, and I'm not going to eat. That's your body's kind of sending you these signals that like, that wouldn't feel good
No,
right now.
girl,
And
we
that's
can't do this. We can't
yeah,
do this.
exactly. Exactly. And that's just the stress response. That's just saying, we don't know how to deal with this stress, so don't add food to it.
Oh, okay. So now, at what age did you finally realize, because you said you became a certified health and nutrition coach
Hmm.
to heal yourself? So 19, this really started and progressed. How many years have gone by now since you're, getting your certification so you can
Yeah.
educate yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that I finally received my certification around, or I started that certification 23. So it was
Okay.
a good like 4 years or so, maybe 3 or 4 years. And then about a year later, I had my certificate. Less than a year, it was about 6 months. But
Mm-hmm.
my education and my like development of my coaching career, my business has since progressed. Like even within the last 2 years, that chunk of two
Mm-hmm.
years, it's been so much growth and development. But I'm thinking, yeah, 23, 24 was when I decided to really like take the next step. Like, I really need to do something about this.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Now, did this gut situation affect your relationship when it came to cooking,
Yeah.
when it came to how you had to prepare meals and what you had to eat?
Yeah.
Because you cut out dairy and gluten for a while. You went and had
Yeah.
that. You went to the Cheesecake Factory to have a cheese. Wait, did you go to the Cheesecake Factory?
I did go to the Cheesecake Factory. You heard right. Yep.
Okay. And that messed up your stomach completely. So I'm assuming you reverted right back to eliminating the dairy and the gluten. Are you
Yeah.
still not doing dairy and gluten?
No, so it's I have a very intentional way of eating. I don't necessarily restrict one thing entirely. I would
Okay.
say I'm mostly gluten-free because
Okay.
that is my biggest trigger. I have a gluten sensitivity that is quite strong that when I eat it, I will consistently get a reaction. So the
Okay.
most part I do like different carbs and starches that are naturally gluten-free, like rice and potatoes, and that was a shift. That was a shift in finding the types of foods that work for me. And I think to kind of finish your answering your question, dairy, I still eat dairy quite a bit. I just kind of will occasionally be like, if that's a little bit too much ice cream, let me lay off for a little while. And it's really been a process of listening to how much my body can handle, which
Okay.
changes on a day to day, week to week basis. And that's one of my
Truly.
biggest lessons and something that I really like to share with people. Like, recognize that what your body's needs and doesn't need can handle and cannot handle, what will feel good and not feel good can change, and it's okay. That's normal. We don't need to create this specific structure necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about developing the skill of listening to your body, honoring it, and kind of changing that process, as you
Mm-hmm.
continue to age and grow and change and heal. Um, so, to your question on the relationship thing, first I want to say the boyfriend that went to me to the Cheesecake Factory back then is still my partner now. So he
Ah,
stuck
that's
through it
good.
all.
So that was that around 19 too?
Yeah, we've been together for, we'll be celebrating our 7-year anniversary this fall.
Congrats. So
Um,
he's sticking through
Thank
all
you.
the gut issues
He's sticking through all the gut issues. He knew me before it. I'm like, you knew me pre-gut issues, like
and the anxiety.
BGC, BGI, pre-gut issues, before gut issues. And but I will say that I think my relationship with myself changed,
Hmm.
which does in turn change relationships with other people. So I
Yeah.
had to learn how to cook. I was not a cook in college. I had to learn
Really?
to cook. I had to
So you
learn to
were a
chef
big
for myself.
eater outer.
Big eater outer. Big eater outer. Sometimes I joke with my boyfriend. I'm like, I think Denny's gave me gluten sensitivity. I think it was all those nights of Denny's.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And I'm as when I was younger, I used to eat out. As I
yeah,
got older, girl, I love a good home cooked meal.
yeah. Me too.
I
Me
really
too.
do. It's a
And
whole different taste.
it is. And I think one of the things that helped me during this time was adopting that mentality of like, oh, it's actually like a wonderful privilege and experience to make food for myself and to
Yeah.
sit down with this fresh home cooked meal. And, eating out can be exciting and can be fun, but this is fun and exciting in a whole different way. And how cool
Hmm.
that I get to turn on my music or, listen to an audiobook while I cook and kind of making a whole ritual out of it and tapping really deeply into my why behind why I was doing this, which is
Hmm.
my values of feeling good, being
Hmm.
authentic, showing up as my truest self. And I
Hmm.
realized that if I was feeling myself in this way, that was going to be my result. If I didn't make this change and I didn't kind of work on myself in this way, I
Hmm.
wouldn't really like who I was becoming. Because again, like I um, just felt really poor. And one of the other strong connections to our gut is our mental health.
Hmm.
About 95% of our serotonin, our feel good neurotransmitter, it's actually made in our gut. As someone who studied
Really?
psychology and behavior, and we heard
It's
about
made in
serotonin,
our gut.
made in our gut, in
Interesting.
our
I didn't know
gut.
that.
Yeah, not our brain. So I realized that a lot of like the anxiety that I was experiencing was probably related to healing of my gut.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the biggest motivators for me to continue to nourish my gut is my mental
Mm-hmm.
health is so,
Mm-hmm.
so important to me. So I,
Mm-hmm.
I really was able to tap into these whys. And that's what I do encourage people to do is like tap into what's most important to you, why you're doing this. And then this change will become more seamless, um, will become easier if you're able to tap into why you're doing this. And I think that's one of the things that kind of mended my relationship with myself during this time because I was feeling sort of guilty and confused and frustrated with myself and
Mm-hmm.
like, body, why can't you just heal? Why can't you just get better? Why are you working
Yeah.
against me? And so I had to adopt certain mindsets. And one of my favorite ones during this time was my body works for me, not against me. I was
Exactly.
really of this mindset that my body was working against me. And I had to say, no, my body works for me. And it might just need a little bit extra help at this time. Let me
Mm-hmm.
honor my body right now. This
You
is what
need
it
to
needs.
listen.
Mm.
When you're young, I don't know if you ever heard when they say, listen to your body, it talks to you
Mm,
and be good to it. I, when I was young, what the hell are you talking about? I don't know
right.
what you're talking about. But as I got older, I understand what that term means. Listen to your body. Your body will tell you when it feels good and when it doesn't. You know, so I wanted to ask you in your studies and as women, do you feel women are the ones that is primarily diagnosed with the irritable bowel syndrome? And as we're going through so much stuff, we get our periods every month. We're always emotionally going through some type of roller coaster. You were talking about your anxiety. Do you think all these connect in some way, shape, or form in helping with the gut coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So IBS is more commonly diagnosed in women. The data shows
Mm,
that women are more likely to have it.
mm-hmm,
I think it's a couple of reasons. To like the scientific physiological stuff that happens for women,
mm-hmm,
hormonally, there are things. Like you said, there's more hormonal fluctuations on a monthly basis that a woman goes through versus a man.
mm-hmm.
And hormone health is linked to gut health. Really,
Mm,
our whole body is so intricately connected, and we experience more changes there, right?
exactly.
We do have unique stressors as women as well. The literal emotional roller coaster that comes like that physical stress of like having a
Mm-hmm.
period, but
Yeah,
also just societal and cultural stressors that we're going to have as women.
exactly.
And to kind of sum up the way that stress affects our digestive system, we have like two nervous systems. Our
Mm-hmm.
parasympathetic is our rest, our digest, our healing state. That's
Mm-hmm.
where we want to be most of our time. Our sympathetic nervous system response is that adrenaline, that fight or flight, that time that cortisol is released, these stress hormones. And so often, especially nowadays, we're living more in the sympathetic, and that's not really where we want to be. Our
Mm-hmm.
digestion shuts down. Hormones like cortisol directly
Mm-hmm.
impacts our gut and our digestion. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there's ways that women can sometimes be more prone to certain stressors than men,
Mm-hmm.
and that could impact it as well. Um, the final thing I'll say on like the science side is there is some research showing like testosterone might be like protective and might help with digestion and we just have
Oh.
less of it than men, right? So it's like there might be some
Interesting.
disadvantages there too, just naturally the way we're made. But the one other thing I say about that, I think it's so important. I work with primarily women, but I've had male clients, and I'm happy to
Mm-hmm.
work with male clients as well. It certainly does not discriminate. Males can have IBS and gut issues. Um, I think one of the reasons, the other reason, just kind of like other side of the coin here,
Mm-hmm.
men might have fewer diagnoses because they tend to get help less than women. Women are more likely to at least get medical help in general. So there might be like more men with gut issues that just don't want to get help for it too. So that's why their numbers might be a little lower. I still think physiologically, women are likely at a little bit more disadvantage, a little bit more risk of getting it. It can definitely be both though, but women's experiences with their hormones and their emotional health is so
Mm-hmm.
important as well. So I love speaking to women on gut health for that reason.
That makes sense because a man is not jumping to go get their yearly physical unless they're being
Yeah,
pushed to do so. So if their
typically.
stomach is hurting, they're dealing with it. And I've had stomach pain, so it's hard to say what IBS really truly feels like because I've never really truly been diagnosed, but I've had stomach pains, I will call it, not a stomach ache, because a
Mm.
stomach ache is really truly different from what I experience. And I do realize that I experience it more if my stress level is a bit higher.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like a significant impact. If my stress level is higher, if my weight fluctuates a little bit, slight things, I'll realize, okay, my stomach is hurting, so I need to make some
Yeah.
modifications. And it comes and goes with me. It might be, I'll be fine for like 7, 8 months. And then all of a sudden it just appears. And now I have to be like, okay, what did I do to make it appear? What's going on in my life? That's why I was talking about, like, as women, when we get older, I understand what it means now. Pay attention to your body
Yeah.
because it does talk to you. So I
Hmm.
totally get that. Now, your anxiety, are you controlling that and keeping that contained and not as anxious as you were in your teenage years? Because
Yeah.
we all know this life that we live in, anxiety is, you can't get away from it sometimes. Your
Yeah.
relationship, there's no such thing as perfect, as we all know that. So, how are you dealing with that, especially with this issue?
Yeah, I really appreciate that you brought that up because I think my journey of gut health
Mm-hmm.
is equally a journey of mental health
Mm-hmm.
and showing up for myself with self-care and really being in tune with I think a lot of throughout this show I've said be in tune with your body and listen to your body, but I think it's equally as important to listen to your mind, your emotions, your intuition as well. And I would say that my current journey is very much one that you just described. Like I recognize that I have so many greater coping skills and a greater understanding and more confidence than when I was younger. I think there was just
Mm-hmm.
this like permission as I got older to like recognize my gifts and talents and to not be so hard on myself and to, recognize that so much of my stress and anxiety was, caused by myself and to really kind of be more comfortable in my skin has been huge. But it's a constant battle of saying, where am I at in my life? What do I need? So, for example, at the beginning of this year, 2020 was actually a wonderful year for my health. And then at the beginning of 2021, I made a move. I made a move to a different state, changed careers, big change in my life. And I felt my
In
stress
2021,
2021, the very
what's
beginning of this year.
what state did you move to?
We moved to Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, from Buffalo, New York.
Oh, you went from
Yeah,
like fast to slow.
kind of. You know what? Everybody thinks that New York is all like the city. I'm
Were you in
talking
the city?
totally, nope, totally other side of the
Oh,
state. Totally other
okay.
side of the state. You know
Okay.
what's interesting? I lived my previous community in New York. I grew up in like the suburbs,
Uh-huh.
suburban city. I lived in like a rural suburban place. So I was
Oh,
able to walk outside of my apartment right down to a beautiful lake. Um,
okay. The part of New
but
York that's not talked about because people
the
only
part of
know Manhattan in New York,
everybody thinks it's
Brooklyn,
yep, yep,
Harlem.
yep, exactly. My boyfriend's from Long Island. He's an
So
Islander.
Long
Yep,
Island is one of them. So
yep.
those are the parts that people know. You don't really know even about the capital, what, Albany?
It's Albany, and the Albany
And
is
people
like
don't
a
even talk about that.
people don't even talk about
They
it
don't
because it's
care.
one of the smaller cities. Nobody cares. The the second biggest city is Buffalo, where I lived. It's like Niagara Falls
Okay.
area. If you know the area, kind of closer to
Yep.
Toronto, other side
Okay.
of the state.
Okay.
Um, yeah, but the particular community I was in was very like nature based, and um, the change was for the best. My boyfriend had gotten a new job opportunity. I was ready to step into my business full time. We were ready to
Wonderful.
kind of move to a little bit bigger city than where I lived in Cleveland here in Ohio. But I think the change did take a toll on me. So, to kind of speak to what you asked about how do I currently manage it, it's recognizing that at that time, I really needed extra, extra self care. And I needed to not feel guilty about that. To kind of say, whoa, this was a transition. And I'm someone who needs to like take a little bit of time to adapt to change. And if I need to have if I need to sleep in, if I need to have more walks out in nature, if I need to work
Hmm.
less, then I'm going to honor that.
That's
And
good.
I think that's one of my biggest lessons is just honoring and recognizing where I'm at and not judging and saying, but I used to be able to handle so much more.
That is
So
good.
Yeah,
That is good. That realization is good. Now, speaking into the future, Miss Anxiety,
sure.
are you thinking about having children? And if you
Yes.
are, how are you planning on dealing with that?
It's such a funny question. Because I think I definitely want children in the future, but I'm in no rush whatsoever.
You're going to
Um,
follow your mom's footsteps.
yeah, I
You'll be
might.
35.
I'll be 35 and I'm okay with that. Like, I
Okay.
think that there's a lot of pressure, with being in a long-term relationship. Why not? What is the marriage and kids coming? But I do know that I
Well,
want
even if you don't get married, I'm the outside the box type of girl. You see, I
nice.
didn't ask you about when are you getting married. I
Yeah.
jumped right into the children. I don't give
I
a
love it.
crap when you're getting married. Are you having kids?
Yeah. I love
You've
that.
been with him for 7 years. At this point, it wouldn't phase me if you said you were pregnant now. I don't care because I've been in my relationship for 23 years. We're not legally married,
Yeah.
but I've always been like, I wanted children. I'm having children.
Wonderful.
Marriage will come later. So that's why I skipped
Yeah.
right over that. And I said, you want children?
Yeah. I think as I see my niece grow up, I have a seven, oh, she's almost 7. She's still 6.
Oh, okay.
But I absolutely love her. And I think being an aunt currently satisfies my need for children and my desire. But I think that anxiety and stress around motherhood and parenting has definitely played into my view of like, yeah, do I want kids? I think I do, but I know that I'm probably going to be not that I want to like create my own reality here, but it's likely that I'm going to be someone who does think about these things really
Mm-hmm.
intensely. I've studied
Mm-hmm.
human behavior and I've studied myself, so I know how actions and feelings and thoughts and words can affect me. I know how it can affect my child. So I
Yeah.
do think it is definitely like something in the back of my mind, like when am I going to feel ready? And
Mm-hmm.
I think what I am going to use to decide this is like, does my desire outweigh any worries about readiness or doing it right
Mm-hmm.
or wrong? And I think right now, personally, honestly, my desire isn't high enough, but I have a desire to have kids one day. So I think it's like if I have this strong desire, I'm going to listen to that and kind of try and release any need for it to be perfect.
That's good. I think you'll be ready when the time comes because you're handling your anxiety now
Yeah.
and you seem to be doing very well. So when that desire increases, I guess to go from level 3 to level 8.
Right. Right,
What?
exactly. We need like a numerical shift here. It needs to be in
Uh-huh.
the
Yep, you'll
upper
be
numbers there.
ready.
Yeah.
So, what words of advice do you have to offer to those who are experiencing gut issues,
Yeah.
stomach issues, being diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, and are
Sure.
at their wits' end on how to deal with it and don't know what to do? Before you answer that, I had a quick question for you about what's the difference between that and the celiac disease and
Yeah.
how to differentiate that for
Sure.
those that might be suffering from that? I have a friend who was diagnosed with that and she went through a lot before it was finally like, okay, this is what you have. But it seems like the stomach issues are slightly similar. But again, I am uneducated in this department. It's just what was told to me. And then you can go into,
Yeah.
the
Well,
inspirational message you have for women.
sure. I think that the really relevant thing about what you just said is like, if you're experiencing my advice to people is if you're experiencing these things, it's first helpful to rule out other diagnoses. So
Mm-hmm.
it's helpful to seek professional help and know
Mm-hmm.
what to ask. So one is
Mm-hmm.
to ask, can you test me for celiacs, like you just said?
Ah, okay.
Um, or other autoimmune conditions. So celiacs
Gotcha.
is an autoimmune disease where specifically gluten, that protein found in breads and pastries and flour,
Mm-hmm.
actually is seen as a foreign invader in the body, and the body attacks the intestines like
Ah.
just like they would attack a virus or a bacteria, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, 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 we don't like this. It's kind of like an allergy, but it's specifically at the intestinal level. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people with celiac disease will have really intense digestive concerns, like really intense constipation or diarrhea or vomiting, even
Mm.
or pains when they eat or nausea because of that. So sometimes someone with celiac simply has to go on a gluten-free diet, and then
Mm-hmm.
they're fine otherwise, right?
Gotcha.
Sometimes these
Okay.
things can go hand in hand, though. So there's other conditions that are irritable bowel diseases that are also autoimmune, like you may have heard of ulcerative colitis or
Heard of
Crohn's
that.
disease.
Yep. Heard of
Yeah,
both.
those are also diseases where like there's something with like there's like polyps on the intestines or the intestines, like the immune system in the body is reacting more intensely internally than
Mm-hmm.
if someone had just IBS. So it's really helpful to seek a medical professional and say like, what tests can we do for celiac blood work for some of these other ones you might have to get a colonoscopy. I had my
Mm-hmm.
colonoscopy at 22. You can do it.
Really?
Yep.
I have not had one yet.
Yeah, it wasn't pleasant, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, it wasn't, you
It
drank
doesn't sound
it
pleasant,
doesn't sound
Trish.
pleasant,
It
no.
just doesn't. When I think about it, I'm like, and aren't they usually, well, no, do men get, no, they get prostate tests. I'm thinking prostate.
They get prostate that's
But
typically
do they get
later.
it later in life?
So a lot of, like, colonoscopies aren't they don't really recommend that you need to have it until later, because that's when, like, colon cancer is more common when you're older.
Ah,
However, if you're, like, really seriously suffering, if you see blood in your stool, if, like,
mm-hmm.
you have vomiting, if it's really intense, it's just worth asking your doctor. And for me, I had some of those things, so we're like, "Let's rule this out." And then you can be left with this general IBS or gut issues, and
Mm-hmm.
my words of wisdom now for you, those of you suffering with that, is to know that I want to validate you first and say gut issues are complicated. There's
Mhm.
no going around it. So, really seeking help, whether it's personally, professionally, with a coach, a nutritionist, a doctor that you really trust, just a
Mhm.
team of friends to kind of help you and be your support along this time
Mhm.
is going to be so, so worth it and so necessary. If you're feeling like I'm doing a lot of trial and error, you're totally doing it right. But ultimately, learning to kind of tap into your why, like what do you really want instead, and
Mhm.
using that kind of as your vision to keep you motivated to explore this is going to be what is going to help you be successful, because it is trial and error. If it's you have good days and bad days, that just
Mhm.
means you're doing it right. And
True.
eventually you're going to get to the more good days. Steadfast, it typically takes about 6 months to heal your gut. So
Mhm.
know that this is a journey and it's okay. It's
It
totally okay. It's totally normal. You're not alone. Seek support, seek community, and it is definitely possible to heal.
Wonderful. And that's good word of advice to know that you're not alone. And it does take time to heal your gut. I mean, it takes
Yeah.
time to heal anything, just as a wound, or if you get a
Hmm.
cut, you see how long it takes. So just imagine the gut that we cannot see how long it
Yeah.
takes for it to repair itself from whatever thing you ate that just did not sit well with your body. And so many connections that you had said in the beginning, especially as women, so many hormonal issues and so much things that we go through on a monthly basis. So be kind to yourself. I like how you
Yes.
said that. And, it's okay. It's all right.
Be
Don't
kind to yourself.
overthink
It's
the
okay.
situation. Yeah.
Yep.
So, Trish, I want to thank you for being a guest and for educating us today, because you really truly don't realize how the gut connects with your body and how everything you're going through, a lot of times, stress will stress you out and it
Yeah.
affects your body, and you don't realize that. So, as always, thank you for listening, guys, and have a great day. Remember to love yourself, voice yourself, and be yourself. Until the next podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Fanpale Podcast. If you want to continue the conversation or share your takeaways, I want to hear from you. Head on over to the website or join our Facebook community and comment your favorite part of the show or share your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Chat with you next week.